GCSE Poetry, War and Conflict, The Charge of the Light Brigade, and poems to compare it to. Before we start, I just want to say a quick thank you to the physics and math tutor for access to their annotated poems. This is not sponsored, I just want to tell you a really great resource, and the link is in the description for more on their website. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward, the light brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners but there, charging an army, while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. All that was left of them, left of 600. Where can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honour the charge they made. Honour the light brigade. Noble 600. So, this poem is about war, and it talks about, they call it a light brigade. In the beginning there's repetition of half a league, and this repetition of distance emphasises their journey and how there's a sense of exposure and vulnerability. There is a constant repetition of 600, and this number is repeated throughout the poem to emphasise the lives lost. Forward, the light brigade, charge for the guns. Now this reported speech shows the sense of duty to their leaders. Was there a man dismayed? This rhetorical question implies that there is some doubt in the soldier's mind. Someone had blundered. This foreshadows the military mistake about to occur. Valley of death. Now this is a biblical allusion which creates a grand sense of scale as well as foreshadowing death. You could also talk about the religious side of soldiers. Now the repetition of cannon emphasises the military machinery surrounding them. Stormed at with shot and shell. The use of sibilants here creates a sinister tone, increasing the aggressive tone of the violence being described. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air. Now these fricatives and sibilant sounds are used in the emphatic repetition to highlight the brutality of the situation. Cannon, cannon, cannon. This is again repeated to emphasise the harsh, mechanical nature of war. It also symbolises the lives being constantly lost. When can their glory fade? This rhetorical question alludes to the poem being a piece of propaganda. Honour the charge they made, honour the light brigade. This shows how the poem is glorifying war. And we'll notice later on why this is. And finally it ends in Noble 600. Now the use of an imperative to close the poem with the intention of glorifying the soldiers. Poet context. So this was written by Lord Alfred Tennyson, who was born in 1850 and died in 1892. Tennyson had an unhappy childhood caused by his abusive father, who left his mother and her child fearful for their safety. He did, however, receive a good education through his middle-class family and rich relatives, who allowed him to attend excellent grammar schools. After a period of experiencing intense poverty, Tennyson was given the role of Poet Laureate. In this position, he was duty-bound to glorifying war to the British public to defend the positions of the aristocracy. So let's look at structure and form essay points. First of all, it takes the form of a ballad, which is a historic poetry form used to commemorate a story for future generations to hear. Now, this poem fits the exact purpose of a ballad and acts to memorialise the people who were killed. It's also in the form dactylic dimeter, and this is when there's a long syllable followed by two short syllables to mirror the rhythm of a horse running into battle. This unrelenting rhythm implies that the soldiers have no choice but to run into battle, or they are blindly obeying orders. The meter could also be interpreted to be used to create satirical humour, which is sarcasm or irony in criticising a system, as it's often seen as light-hearted rhythm. Rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme is irregular, and there are rhyming couplets between indented lines. The couplets create a sense of inevitability, however chaos is introduced by the irregular rhyme scheme. Language essay points. So repetition is used, the anaphora used in "there's not to make reply, reasons why, there's but to do and die," reiterates the phrase, and the soldier's obedience, which is a desirable trait in terms of Victorian England. The repetition also highlights the soldier's lack of individualism. The use of epistrophe in Road the 600 focuses the listener on the topic of the poem, as well as acting as a reprise for the ballad. Euphemisms are also used, which is to soften the impact of a brutal battle. Now, euphemism is when a softer word is used to sort of mask a much harder meaning. Tennyson uses euphemisms instead of explicitly referring to death. He states that horses and hero fell, which is emphasised through his use of alliteration. The falling of the soldiers is accompanied by the falling rhythm of the dactylic dimeter. In his role as laureate, it was his job to avoid presenting the reality of battle. Metaphors. Tennyson uses metaphors which creates negative connotations for the listener. In Jaws of Death, Jaws has claustrophobic connotations which imply that soldiers will be eaten up or shredded by bullets. Similarly, the metaphor Mouth of Hell, which is repeated twice, creates the impression that there is no escape from the valley once it's been entered. This also alludes to the story of the Roman soldier Curtitius, who rode his horse into the mouth of hell and was killed sacrificially, saving Rome. Symbolism is also used in the phrase Valley of Death, which is a biblical allusion from Psalm 23, referring to the protection provided by God, so is highly ironic when used in this context. And finally, poems to compare it to. So the first one being Bayonet Charge. Both poems criticise the leaders of war. Although this is explicit in Bayonet Charge, it's more subtle in the Charge of the Light Brigade, and both highlight the power of propaganda and attitude towards war. In terms of differences, Charge of the Light Brigade praised the blind obedience of the soldiers, whereas Bayonet Charge changed the perception of honour, and it's challenged. Tennyson also presents soldiers' bravery in the repetition, whereas Hughes encourages the questioning of war and whether it really is honour. Charge of Light Brigade also compares well to Exposure. In terms of similarities, Tennyson is critical of military leaders' decisions by bluntly declaring someone was blundered and stating honour the Light Brigade, and Owen is quite similarly negative and creates this effect. However, in differences, Tennyson is critical of rash action in his poem, and it's very brash, whereas Owen detests the waiting in the trenches. Tennyson couldn't be directly critical of the government because of his position as poet laureate. However, Owen did not have these restrictions, as he was a soldier in the front line. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to subscribe, and for more advice follow me at Noel for GCSE. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.